Now in the last couple episodes I've been trying to add a few details to the surrounding landscape around our village, and in the previous episode we added the landscape and vegetation around the flower shop here. And before the start of today's episode I've added in some beehives, so once in a while we get to see a bee that leaves its hive, and that adds a little bit of atmosphere here to the village. Now in addition, I've also added in some vegetation here next to the fortress, just to add a little bit of character and depth as well. Now bits of landscaping and terraforming aren't all we're going to be doing in this episode. We're also going to be building across the river here, where we're going to be building a windmill, some farmland, a custom tree, some waterfalls as well. So there's quite a few things to get started on today. Now first up, we're going to be laying out some paths for this area that we'll be building in today, just so it makes things a little bit easier to visualize. Now the idea behind the layout of the roads is that they take the path of least resistance as they travel across the countryside. So this one here travels along the water, so that carts don't have to be needlessly pushed up and down hills, but instead you sort of slope around. So even though it might not be a bird's eye shortest path, it will be the least tedious path as we wrap around here. Of course eventually we do have to go up the hill, but that can't really be avoided in our case. The idea is also that this path that we just followed is going to continue on over here, where we're going to be building a dock at some point in the future, as well as we're going to be building a mining town behind there. So that's where this path will eventually take us. The other path here that takes us up the hill will go up to the windmill, which we're going to be building here in a little bit. Now for the moment the path is very simple, and we are going to be terraforming the land beside the path, so there's a little more detail to things, and so it isn't that simple. But I am also at a little bit of a standstill regarding what blocks to use. I have considered using things like mud and stuff like that, but the issue is that that will also resemble the roofs of the village a little too much, and I don't want things to blend in too much when looking at it from above. Now it is of course also a very realistic possibility that we use different color palettes for the different roads in different areas, as a road over here will be a little more rural, and it sort of makes sense that it isn't as well developed as a path in here, where you could make an argument for utilizing things such as cobblestone and the likes, as it's a little more permanent in a place like this. And that the area as a whole would have to sustain a little more wear and tear compared to paths here in the countryside. Now I think we're going to shelve the talk about the roads of the region for the moment. We have a windmill to build, so let's get to it. Alright, so the windmill is all finished up, and let's go take a closer look at it. The first thing you guys will notice is probably that the color palette is very different compared to the ones we've used in the village over there. And I've also tried to be a little more deliberate in the texturing that I've done here on this windmill. Now I've decided to use a lot of stone here for the windmill as well, and that's because we're going to be building a mining village over here beyond this ridgeline. So I feel it would make sense that builds that are closer to the mining village here will be utilizing stone in a larger proportion than those that are a bit further away. Now here the other day in real life I saw a house with a red tile roof, and I decided that that would be a pretty good reference image for the build here today. So I've decided to sort of replicate that. We've used the granite here as the red tiles, and then we've used the cobble deep slate along with the top blocks to sort of suggest that there's different levels of dirtiness on the roof, so like build up of grime or something like that. And then there was also this very light gray color atop the roof, and I'm not quite sure what that actually was, but I think it could have been something like bird poop or whatever, so I decided to add that in as well. Now of course the house that I've used as a reference wasn't actually a windmill, so I didn't have too much to go by with regards to shape of the windmill here atop the roof, but from googling around a bit I saw some that had sort of a dome shape here, which is what I've tried to recreate as well. Again with some discoloration atop the roof, which sort of taper off as we descend down the side of the walls here. Now, one thing you guys have probably noticed is that I've used a lot of glow like in here on the build, and that's sort of just to assist the gradient a little bit. The further we go away, the more things sort of blend in together, and I think it's actually come in quite nicely. When building it, I didn't intend for one to be up close to the windmill very often, and it's sort of like a building that's intended to be looked at from quite a distance. And from here, things blend in quite nicely together. And I've also added in the stone perimeter here, which sort of serves as a boundary between the wheat fields that we're going to be building in a little bit, and the private area of the people who live in the windmill. And I've tried to add a bit of decorations here as well. Some flowers, some bushes, things like that. And behind the windmill here, I thought that adding in a small cart for the farmer to utilize would be a nice little touch, so that he can transport his goods into the village and all the other areas that we'll be building in the future episodes. Now as for the interior, we go up the stairs here and inside, and I haven't built anything yet. We're going to be building that in just a little bit, but I just wanted to show you guys the rooms as they are right now. So we have sort of a main room here, and then a small attic. And inside the central part of the mill here, we have an opportunity to add some mechanisms, but I feel like it's also a good spot to maybe add a farm. So perhaps like a bone meal farm or something would be suitable in here. We also have a little bit of a space down here, which I'm not sure what to utilize for quite yet, but you could make like a small seed farm or something like that. And that could work quite nicely along with a bone meal farm here, if we decide to go down that route. Now, before we get started on the interior, I want to take a look at the fortress over here, because in the last episode we decided to populate it with villagers, and I think now would be a good time to go check up on them. Now, in the last episode there were only 3 villagers here, and I think I can drop a spoiler that there's quite a few more now. Take a look at this. This has turned out quite successfully, if I do say so myself. I've also decided to give them access here to the roof again. We had some troubles last time with them getting stuck here and refusing to move, but they've sorted that out, it seems. Now, what's facilitating all this is the wheat farm down here, and they have actually begun to harvest the crops, so that's nice, and that also means that they can sustain their own population in here. And we also get some villagers that we can give other trades. It could be nice to get some librarians, and possibly some mending books, since some of my tools here are very low on durability. But in general, just seeing the villagers walk around the top of the fortress and out onto some of the ramparts is a very nice addition. It would be nice to be able to have them walk around the village here, but it's not really that safe yet, so we're gonna have to figure something out regarding that at some point. Alright, I think that's enough talk about the villagers for now. Let's decorate the interior of the windmill here. So what I'm thinking is that we're gonna be utilizing the downstairs room here, the main room, as sort of a living area, and then upstairs here in the attic, we're gonna be making it into a sort of makeshift bedroom. But I think we should start down here in the living room, and what would be better than a bit of a table with a painting over it and some candles here on one side as well as a flower on the other. I think that looks pretty good. Now we should probably follow that up with a chair here as well, otherwise it doesn't really make too much sense. Now let's get an armor stand here so the farmer has a place to put his clothes, and probably some decorated pots here as well with a couple more flowers and another painting. I think this is actually pretty decent so far. We haven't overly crammed it with things all over the place, but a rug would probably be a nice addition, since the floor as it is a little bit monotone. Alright, after a little bit of fiddling around with the carpet, I think this looks pretty good. Alright, up in the attic here, I think one of the main features we're going to be utilizing is fence gates and fence, just as a kind of support structure for the roof. So something like this here, with some darker colors mixed in as well. And a little bit up here as well. Should probably do the trick. There we go, I think that's come together quite well. Now we just need a few accessories here. A barrel in the middle probably. Should probably turn it facing upwards here. With some candles on top, if I can manage to place them. And then probably a lantern here so monsters don't spawn. And finally a couple of accessories. I think this is quite nice. Quite cozy. It just needs a rug as well. There we go, I think that's a suitable bedroom. Now additionally, I talked about building some farms here in the central part of the mill, and I've halfway done that. I wanted to make a bone meal farm, and so I set up a bamboo farm, but then I actually realized that you can't put bamboo sprouts here in a composter to make bone meal. So, well, we do have a bamboo farm now, and it hasn't produced anything yet, which I'm quite surprised about. It really should be. Like, this should just grow and then it should be cut down, but I guess it'll grow eventually. Now I've also decorated the basement here as a bit of a storage room, so there's space for the weeds and all the other things that the farmer would have gathered. And also just like a place to place his pots and things like that. Now with that said, I've just grabbed some bone meal here so we can try to force the farm to work, just to make sure that I haven't messed anything up. So it worked partially, which is good, but it should have destroyed this as well. I wonder what went wrong. Oh, I think it's this one. Yeah. There has to be redstone on top of this. That makes sense. All right, here we go. I think that should do the trick. Let's place the bamboo back and see if these get broken here now. They did. That's nice. And we do get some drops here in the chest, so it's working as intended now. Now we probably won't get a lot of bamboo here from the small bamboo farm, but it adds a little bit of purpose to the windmill, so that's a good addition in any case. Now with the windmill wrapped up, we're going to be building 2 waterfalls. The first is going to have its origin up here, and then it's going to slowly trickle downstream over the road here, or under in this case, and then over to this large hole here. And the second one will bring more than just aesthetics. It will originate from up here, and then slowly trickle down and form a large pool in this area, and then continue on over here and down into the river, where we'll have another small bridge for us to be able to pass over it. And this waterfall and the river that stems from it will also have some lore implications, which we will get into after it's built. So without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so both waterfalls are completed, and let's go take a look at them. First, we're going to take a look at this one close to the windmill. And I thought that since this stream here was very close to what will be farmland in just a little bit, that it would make sense that sort of the walls of the stream had like a brownish tint. Some parts here have some grass that are sticking out, but they should hopefully be replaced with dirt if I remember to do it once we sort of till the fields here in this area. That's also a reason for there not being too much in terms of decorations here, since everything right beside the stream is going to be wheat fields, so there isn't really any space to do anything. We have some grass strewn about, and maybe I should have changed some parts here for flowers as well, but we can do that after we see what the situation looks like with all the fields in place. But with that said, let's head over to the other waterfall. Wait, how did that guy get up there? He must have gotten pushed over the edge or something, because there's no way he would elect to take a 4-block drop on his own. That's pretty crazy. Anyway, this stream is quite a bit more decorated, and it also uses a slightly different palette since the fields are gonna be limited to around this area here. So there won't really be that much to influence the sort of walls and the shapes of this pond and the streams and the waterfall. I've tried to add some larger boulders strewn about, like the one over there, and slightly larger version over here, and the big one here, just to break things up a little bit so it wasn't as monotone, because otherwise it would have been grass, coarse dirt, and perhaps a little bit of stone around the edges. So I've tried to break that up a little bit. And as we travel downstream here, we do have the small bridge as well, which will allow people who come from far off lands to travel across the small stream and into the village, as well as all the other areas that we'll build in the future. And I also really enjoy how this fans out as it connects up with the river. All these smaller streams that the large stream here splits up into as it hits the beach. Now with that being said, I do believe I've promised to talk about a little bit of the lore relevance of this stream here, so let's get into it. In the last episode, I talked about how the fortress was capable of projecting strength across the bridge and into the farmland we've built today. Additionally, I mentioned the significant turmoil in this area, The stream that connects to the river serves as a natural boundary, marking the extent of the fortress' influence. Up to this point, the area remains contested, as another faction is also vying for control. Beyond the stream, however, authority shifts to a different faction, one that remains unknown for now, but is likely affiliated with the mining village beyond the hills. Naturally, the faction has a vested interest in preserving the resources under its control, particularly the vast wheat fields, as food is of paramount importance in these troubled times. Now with that said, let's build some wheat fields. Now with the fields outlined, I needed significantly more seeds than I had on hand, so I traveled back to my old base to get them. And here I decided to bring back my parrots on the return trip. Now the parrots weren't keen on traveling across the open ocean, and I even tried to build some stepping stones for them, but they didn't budge. That meant that there was only one option left. We had to go through the nether. The trip had gone surprisingly well, but with the exit portal inside, tragedy struck. I frantically attempted to build a platform to save as many parrots as I could, but as they kept falling into the lava, there was only one way out. I had to go up. With the few remaining parrots closely behind, we ran for the portal and made it to safety. Back in the village, I placed one on the leafless tree, one on the barge by the river, and the last two survivors on the ridge so they could safely monitor their surroundings. And with that, it's time to plant the seeds. Now that's about 100 stacks of seeds, and I really like how this has turned out. Especially also the small scarecrows here that I've added sporadically. It really adds a nice touch to the build. But with that, there's only one more thing I want to add today, and that's a tree over here. It's an area I'm trying to improve in, so let me know how you guys think it turned out.